Hello, Nevada, and those of you joining us maybe from other states. My name is Maureen Kerner. I'm the Associate Director of the Environmental Finance Center at California State University, Sacramento. Welcome to day 4. It's a great afternoon here of day 4 of a 4-part webinar series that focuses on funding water programs and projects in Nevada. A little bit of housekeeping before we really run forward. The webinar is being recorded. The video links will be sent to you at the end of the completion of the webinar today. Slides will be posted on our EFC at Sac State website, and we will notify the registrants when those are available. It probably takes us about 1 or 2 weeks to get those up. You can send your questions today through GoToQuestions or chat, and then I can read those off to our panelists. We'll be giving them about 15 minutes or so with a few minutes for Q&A at the end of each talk. And you've got my contact information and our EFC at Sac State website there for you, and you'll see those throughout today for your reference. A huge shout out to our sponsors, particularly the US EPA, that has provided various different types of funding agreements and grants to make this webinar happen today, and several other webinars that we do. Those webinars or those grants come through the Environmental Finance Center Network, which is a group of 10 centers located throughout the US. In particular, the particular centers supporting today, in addition to my office at Sac State, is the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, the Southwest Environmental Finance Center at the University of New Mexico, and the Environmental Finance Center at Syracuse University. Another very big thank you to Jason Cooper at the Nevada Division of Environmental Protection. Jason was the one who kind of reached out to EPA Region 9 and had expressed interest in trying to bring Nevada utilities, water utilities, and communities more information about funding opportunities. And so, as you'll see today, we've been putting together a series of webinars that discuss not just project funding opportunities, but also program. And I'll go through that a little bit with you as a review from the last few days. But first, a few more words about the Environmental Finance Center Network. So I had said that there's one center in each of the EPA regions. So there's 10 of us, and we do all kinds of technical, managerial, and financial assistance, and that occurs either as training through in-person workshops or forums. We do a lot of webinars and online training. The type of assistance can be adaptive and resiliency planning, asset management. Maybe you're interested in developing rates or updating your utility rates and fees. Maybe you need to learn more about trying to get support from upper management or your board of directors. We look at a lot of consolidation or even kind of managerial consolidation, partnerships, and collaboration. So a whole gamut of kind of TMF and capacity building. In addition to that online and in-person training, many of the centers provide technical assistance where it's kind of one-on-one with different utilities to do some of these particular aspects, elements of program management. So the EFC in Region 9 we're located in the Office of Water Programs at California State University, Sacramento. Our program was started by a professor at Sac State about 50 years ago, creating training manuals for managers and operators of drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater programs. And that since have expanded now to online courses and manuals and that. There's technical and managerial research program that started back about 30 years ago. The focus then was very much on stormwater, but in the last 10, 15, 20 years, we've branched out into all the different realms of water, watershed planning, drinking water, wastewater as well. And so ultimately our focus here at Region 9 in Sacramento is TMF experience and tools for water systems. The EFCs don't just work with water systems, many of them also work with waste management systems, some work with commercial or industrial businesses for their waste management or other types of sustainability activities. So this webinar came about just to address so much of the growing demand on water programs. There's aging infrastructure, there's so many more floods, droughts, fire, that climate change impact, declining and depletion of groundwater. There's all kinds of new regulations that are coming up or they're changing, trying to keep up with all those things. And then on top of that, there's all these new emerging contaminants that particularly drinking water or wastewater systems, and even stormwater too, need to contend with. So we put this webinar series together with kind of an intent to acknowledge the challenges for funding programs and projects that water utilities are facing, but then also provide tips, strategies for addressing the challenges. So many people, when you registered, you had to fill out a couple of questions, multiple choice questions, I think, and many people identified the burdens of the grant and loan process as pretty challenging, along with fee barriers. Staff time and capacity was another popular one. Some of the strategies that we've been discussing over the last several days was involved organizing your program activities and estimating costs. We included a look at asset management. There were a few talks about sustainable revenue streams, developing those and how to be an advocate for your program. If you joined us on Tuesday, we had a comprehensive review of planning projects, thinking through, knowing what your goals and objectives are, working with consultants and experts, and then tips for applying, putting applications together. And today we're going to be focused even more on that last element of putting applications together to really note about the specific funding opportunities from various state and federal programs. So I mentioned last week, Tuesday and Thursday, May 18th and 20th, we had a series of speakers that focused on understanding program costs and pursuing sustainable funding streams. And those webinars are available on video at the EFCN website. And we will be posting those as well to our EFC website at Sac State, and you'll get notified when those are available. On Tuesday, like I said, we had to focus on developing projects, preparing to obtain funding. We had a presentation from Heather Himmelberger, who's the director of the Southwest Environmental Finance Center, who has been doing many of these types of assistance for over 30 years. And then we also had staff, kind of a case study, staff from the Truckee Meadows Water Authority came and gave us the story of their integrated approach for their 3 different plans that all kind of feed in together for water resource facility and funding. And then today we're going to focus on applying for specific funding sources. So specifically on the agenda today, we have Ariel Gerstein from EPA Wifi program. We have Jason Cooper from the Nevada Department of Environmental Protection, the State Revolving Fund, and their Capacity Development Program. Cheryl Couch will present opportunities through the USDA Rural Development Program. Jessica Sanders from Nevada Governor's Office of Economic Development in the CDBG program. Robin Graber from USDI Bureau of Reclamation talking about the Water Smart program, and then I'll wrap it up for you and let you know where you can get more information. Tess, I had, before we go to the poll, I do want to have you post maybe in the chat the location where, if people are interested in obtaining technical assistance from the EFCN, there is funding currently available. And there's actually a website on the EFCN website, there's a page where you can request that assistance. So Tess will go ahead and post that into chat for us so you have that access. You can always contact me or any of the other environmental finance centers. And if we can't help you, we can hook you up with one of those centers that can. So with that, Tess, I will let you take it away with the poll.
Great. Yes, there is a link posted in the chat where you can click to fill out our request assistance form through the EFC Network website. And we wanted to know what type of organization you represent, just to see who's in the room with us today. So please tell us if you are a small municipality, medium municipality or water system, a large municipality or water system consultant, or if you're in some sort of educational capacity, whether at a state agency or at an institution. And we'll give you just a few more seconds to fill this out. I see 75% of folks have filled out the poll, so we'll close this in 3, 2, and 1. Okay, and it looks like we do have a couple different you have a pretty wide array of folks here today. 33% are larger water systems and consultants. We do have a good number of educational affiliated staff or institutional staff, and also several small water systems. So that's good to see.
Great. Yeah, welcome everybody. We hope today will bring you some useful information. So again, we'll go ahead and bring over Ariel Gerstein to start talking about the Wifi program at EPA. So the intent really for all these speakers is to kind of put a face behind the programs and let you know about the project eligibility, the funding eligibility requirements, and also kind of tips and strategies for filling out applications. And all of these folks are here to help you. So if you're interested in pursuing one of these funding opportunities, please reach out to them individually. So with that, Ariel, welcome. I'll just read your bio to introduce you to everyone. Ariel is a program manager for the Water Infrastructure Financing and Innovation Act, or WIFIA, program in the Office of Water at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. She joined the team in 2017. Prior to WIFIA, Ariel worked in sustainability at a local university and as a statistician for the U.S. Census Bureau. Ariel received her BA degree from the University of Tampa and her graduate degree in Natural Resources and Sustainable Development from American University. So with that, thanks for coming, Ariel, and I will pass you the torch.
All right, thanks so much, Maureen. And as Maureen said, I'm a program manager with the Environmental Protection Agency's WIFIA program, so that is what I'm going to be talking about today. So just first slide, this is basically our mission. The program, the WIFIA program, is relatively new at EPA. It was designed to accelerate investment in our nation's water and wastewater infrastructure by providing long-term, low-cost supplemental credit assistance under customized terms to credit-worthy water and wastewater projects all over the country. So I'm just going to give some high-level information about the program. So WIFIA is a federal credit program which allows it to leverage its federal appropriation. Congress only needs to appropriate money to cover estimated losses, and the remainder of the funding is borrowed to and repaid from Treasury. Borrowed from and repaid to Treasury. Because the water industry has a low risk profile, the congressional appropriation can support a much larger amount of infrastructure investment. For example, EPA has received a $55 million appropriation for our fiscal 2021 selection round, which we're currently in. This amount will allow the agency to make about $5.5 billion in loans. And because WIFIA can only fund 49% of eligible project costs, the total infrastructure investment would be approximately $11 billion. So one of the great things about the WIFIA program is its ability to lend to a broad set of eligible borrowers with a wide array of eligible projects. The following types of entities can borrow from WIFIA: local, state, tribal, and federal government entities, partnerships and joint ventures, corporations and trusts, and clean water and drinking water state revolving funds can also borrow directly from WIFIA. As you can see, almost any entity is eligible to borrow from WIFIA. The only ineligible entity is an individual person, such as a homeowner or farmer. Moving on to the project type eligibilities, WIFIA can basically reach down to almost all water and wastewater infrastructure projects. Projects that are eligible for WIFIA loans include wastewater and drinking water, conveyance and treatment rehabilitation and construction projects, non-point source pollution projects, stormwater management projects, decentralized wastewater treatment, enhanced energy efficiency projects at drinking water and wastewater facilities, desalination projects, water reuse and recycling projects, drought mitigation projects, acquisition of property if it's integral to the project or will mitigate the environmental impact of a project, and a combination of projects that is secured by a common security pledge or submitted under one application by a state revolving fund program. So this slide shows portfolio statistics for closed loans and active projects moving toward loan close. As you can see, WIFIA has a variety of project types and is pretty evenly split between wastewater and drinking water projects. We also have funded water reuse combined project, which is wastewater and drinking water projects combined under one loan, as well as stormwater only. The WIFIA portfolio leans toward larger communities, as is seen by the loan amounts and community sizes. We can fund small communities defined by our statute as less than 25,000 people, or medium communities as well. We also provide financing to entities all over the country. With many projects in California, Florida, and Illinois, we are not currently working with any communities in Nevada. So this slide shows 4 of our closed loans to highlight unique aspects of the WIFIA loan. So the first row, in 2018, WIFIA closed one of its first loans to Orange County Water District. This borrower received an interest rate of 3.06% based on the Treasury rate at the time. Last year, due to very low interest rates, WIFIA added the flexibility of offering loan re-execution to those borrowers who had not yet drawn down on their loan. In the case of Orange County, they received a new interest rate of 1.04%, saving the community more money. Moving on to the second example, WIFIA can also finance multiple borrowers who are partnering on one project. So in this case, WIFIA received one letter of interest, which I'll talk about what that is more later, from Tualatin Valley Water District and the City of Hillsborough in Oregon. WIFIA closed a loan with each entity on very similar timelines, giving the entities access to the financing for one project. And the City of Cortland in New York is one of WIFIA's small community borrowers. The city was not able to secure state financing for the entire project, so used WIFIA to supplement the financing they already had to complete their project. And for the fourth row, WIFIA is now offering a newer flexibility called the Master Agreement. Hampton Roads Sanitation District in Virginia received WIFIA's first master agreement, which allows them to secure a large upfront commitment and then close multiple loans at different times. The advantage of this master agreement structure is if a borrower has to work over a longer period of time, for example, more than 5 years, and the federal requirements like NEPA will be complete at different time intervals. This allows borrowers to access small pieces of the total financing as federal requirements are complete by closing multiple loans. So I'm just going to go over some program features. The interest rate for WIFIA is set at closing. It's a single fixed rate that does not fluctuate depending on timing of the disbursements or rating of the entity. The rate is locked on the day of loan closing. We determine the rate by adding 1 basis point to the state and local government series or SLUG's daily rate with a maturity that is equal or greater than the weighted average life of the WIFIA loan. Using the weighted average life means that the interest rate will be lower than the 30-year SLUG's rate in most cases. The average interest rate for our current portfolio is 1.7%, and the 30-year SLUG's rate is currently approximately 2.3%. As I already mentioned, the maximum loan amount for WIFIA, we can only fund up to 49% of total eligible project costs. And for our current funding round that we have open, we are offering up to 80% financing for small communities, those communities with 25,000 people or less. The maturity date must be the earlier of 35 years after the date of substantial completion of the project or its useful life of the project. Interest payments must commence no later than 5 years following substantial completion of the project. WIFIA borrowers can also defer repayment for up to 5 years after substantial completion of the project. And the total project cost must be at least $20 million to be eligible for WIFIA financing and at least $5 million for small communities. So because WIFIA provides up to 49% financing in most cases, we frequently work with the state revolving funds to finance projects. However, WIFIA was created to fill in gaps or provide larger amounts of funding to projects in cases where the state revolving fund does not have enough financing. And this varies by state depending on how oversubscribed the state revolving fund is. So now I'm going to go over some of the benefits of the WIFIA program. I already mentioned our interest rate. It's set at the day of closing and locked at that rate for the life of the loan. And just as a reminder, we offer loan re-execution to take advantage of more favorable interest rate environments. WIFIA also has no penalties for loan prepayment, and the repayment can be 35 years with up to 5-year deferral from substantial completion. One of WIFIA's most important benefits is the ability to backload repayments and sculpt the repayment schedule. This allows borrowers to slowly raise rates over time instead of large increases for ratepayers. WIFIA can also take a subordinate lien position as long as the other project debt is on the same lien. We can also accept a variety of financial model formats for reporting after the loan closes, and we can also prioritize the closing of the schedule of a borrower who wants to move more quickly toward loan closing. And as mentioned before, we can also combine multiple projects under one loan agreement, which many of our borrowers have taken advantage of. So borrowers must comply with all federal laws and regulations. This slide contains a list of the most common federal requirements, including NEPA, American Iron and Steel, and Davis-Bacon wage requirements. WIFIA projects may also be eligible for coverage under the WIFIA Programmatic Environmental Assessment, or PEA. The PEA analyzes the potential environmental impacts related to the issuance of credit assistance under WIFIA. The PEA is an innovative approach to environmental review covering a group of projects that are similar in scope, scale, and magnitude, and that have similar types of impacts rather than a singular project. Projects covered under the PEA do not require an additional public notification or public comment period. So just some information about our current status. We have invited 149 borrowers through 4 rounds of funding. Although WIFIA is competitive, it's not highly competitive at this point. For example, last year, we selected approximately 80% of submitted projects, and we also put several others on the wait list, and 2 out of 3 projects on our wait list have moved off the wait list into our active pipeline. This year, we have available $5.5 billion in funding that is open until July 23rd of this year. In order to apply for this funding, borrowers need to submit a letter of interest. A link to the letter of interest can be found in this presentation on the resources slide, which is coming up later. So this is a map of our loans by state. As you can see, we've closed a loan or are working to close a loan in most states across the country. So I'm going to quickly go through our application process. So the first step in our application process is submitting a letter of interest. Once we have the letter of interest, we do an eligibility screening for all the projects that submitted a letter of interest. And we check these 4 things that are on the screen. So the first thing we check is that the entity applying is an eligible entity, and I went over those in the previous slide. And if it's a private entity, that it has demonstrated public sponsorship. Next, we just make sure that the project is eligible, as described earlier. We want to make sure the anticipated project costs are at least $20 million or $5 million for small communities. And then we also want to make sure that the request is no more than 49% or 80% for small communities. If the prospective borrower or its project is found to be ineligible, we will notify the point of contact immediately. Only eligible letters of interest will move on in this process. So last year, the Office of Management and Budget, or OMB, implemented new screening criteria as part of the WIFIA evaluation process. EPA is not asking for any additional information in the letter of interest. However, the WIFIA team is required to submit answers to screening questions for each project that will be submitted to OMB for a final determination on eligibility. WIFIA will reach out to borrowers individually if more information is needed. The goal of the screening is to screen out projects that would be considered a federal asset, so it is not applicable to most borrowers and projects. So the WIFIA selection criteria, which is part of the evaluation when you submit a letter of interest, is divided into 3 categories. The first being project impact, the second project readiness, and the third borrower credit worthiness. Each criterion within a category can provide a range of points with the maximum number of points indicated on the next slide. Each category, if you scored a perfect score, you could receive 100 points for each category, totaling 300 points. So this slide shows the various aspects of the selection criteria and how they're weighted by showing the maximum points available for each component. More information about this is provided in Appendix C of our program handbook, which you can find on our website. As you can see, our 5 priorities for fiscal year 2021 are reflected in this scoring. The 5 priorities each are scored 20 points. So most of them are in the project impact criteria, those being protection against extreme weather events, repair, rehabilitation, or replacement of existing water and wastewater infrastructure, economically stressed community. Does the project reduce exposure to lead or emerging contaminants? Those are all worth 20 points, totaling 80 out of the 100 project impact points. And then the 5th priority is newer innovative approaches, which is in the project readiness criteria. So this is a timeline of the entire WIFIA process from submitting a letter of interest to closing a loan. So prospective borrowers have 90 days. Our round opened on April 30th. So from that date, so the due date for the letter of interest, as I said, is July 23rd. WIFIA will then take approximately 90 days to evaluate and select projects. So we expect to be making announcements this fall for selected projects. Selecting project means that WIFIA will invite borrowers to submit an application, which is the second stage of our process. The application is basically a more detailed version of the letter of interest. The prospective borrower has up to a year to submit that application. Once the application is submitted, WIFIA performs due diligence on the documents submitted, the term sheet and loan agreement are drafted and negotiated, and then the loan is closed following the borrower and EPA's approval process. After the application is submitted, the process time really depends on how quickly the borrower wants to move toward closing. WIFIA has closed a loan in a short time period as 4 months, but our average is closer to 6 to 7 months. So just some information about our fees. So for the letter of interest submittal, there are no fees. Once a prospective borrower is invited to apply and submits that application, there's a $100,000 application fee. It's $25,000 application fee for small communities. And in addition to that, we also have credit processing fees, which is basically a reimbursement for engineering, for EPA's engineering, financial, and legal advisors that we hire during the application phase. These fees range between $100,000 to $300,000 for most projects, depending on project complexity. The fee isn't dependent on the size of the project, but more the risk or complexity, and fees may be included as part of the loan financing. So we are hosting a webinar specifically about our fiscal year 2021 funding round on June 1st. The time is East Coast time, so that's where we're located, so it's 2 to 3:30 Eastern time. The registration link is on this slide. We also have a recorded webinar. We did the same webinar last week. So if you are interested in the webinar but can't make the June 1st, you can watch our recorded webinar at the link below. We also have many other webinars about WIFIA on that same site. I've also provided some general resource links and a link to our application materials. So you can find my contact information on this slide, as well as a link to sign up for our mailing list. And that is the end of my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Ariel, thanks so much. That was very well covered. We do have one question that came in. It said, are there funding opportunities that are not loans but grants?
Not through WIFIA. WIFIA is loans only.
Right. Okay. And then actually one more question. It says, how are points awarded for the selection criteria? Are they awarded qualitatively based on consensus of application reviewers, or is there more of a quantitative method?
So It depends. I would say so. It depends on the category. So we have two categories which are more of a pass-fail, and those are technical feasibility and borrower creditworthiness. So those are either if we think the project can be built, if we consider the borrower creditworthy, then basically they'll get those points, and if not, we can't have them continue in the process. All the other points are more in ranges, and we evaluate based on the answers that you provide in the letter of interest, we are evaluating the score that way.
Great. That's all that's come in. Ariel, thanks again so much for joining us and sharing the information. We're going to say probably goodbye to Ariel for today. She's over on the East Coast and ready to go off into the evening. But if you have questions for her, please reach out. You can also reach out to me and I could put you in touch with her. So thanks so much, Ariel.
Thanks so much.
Here. And I'm just waiting so I can share my screen to move on to our next speaker, which is going to be Jason Cooper from Nevada Department of Environmental Protection. Hey, Jason.
Hello.
And I'll share my screen and see if I can minimize this and move over to my slides. Oops. There we go. There's my slides. Okay. Hi, Jason. And then Tess will go ahead and get you set up to share your slides. So Jason is the manager for the state revolving funds and the state capital improvement grants program with Nevada Division of Environmental Protection. Jason is his team of 4 dedicated individuals manage $555 million in assets for water, wastewater, and stormwater systems of any size. Jason is a certified government financial manager and has been working in the public sector of government accounting and finance for 14 years. After spending his early years living in Imlay, Winnemucca, Fallon, and Fernley, Jason moved to Las Vegas to attend the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, where he earned his bachelor's degree in hotel administration. He currently resides in Reno with his family. And with that, Jason, I will let you take it away.
Thank you very much, Maureen. I am trying to get the screen to share at this point. And
it looks
good. Great.
Perfect. Okay, wonderful. So you guys are able to see everything okay?
Yes.
Great. So thank you very much, everyone, for taking time out of your Thursday here right before Memorial Day weekend to join us to talk about funding for water and wastewater projects. As Maureen said, I'm Jason Cooper. I work for the state of Nevada. Not one of the federal guys, but I do receive federal funds, and we also have state money available. And there are 3 programs that I oversee here at the Division of Environmental Protection. I'm going to start off by talking about 2 of them jointly. The state revolving loan fund programs, both drinking water and clean water revolving fund programs. They've been around for quite some time now. Some of you may be familiar with them. Some of you may have some misconceptions about them. Some of you may not know about them at all. So hopefully my presentation will help clear up a little bit for you today. The drinking water program's been around since 1996. In Nevada, we have approximately $60 million sitting in the account today to be able to help borrowers. But we have funded projects as small as $20,000 and as large as $23.7 million in one go. So we're not scared by sitting down and working with the smaller folks too to really get a project funded and help out here. Our goal with the drinking water program is to really help a drinking water system comply with the regulations of the Safe Drinking Water Act, or just even rehabilitate the infrastructure of the system. And in some of my next slides, I'll show you which systems are eligible and which projects are eligible for that program. The Clean Water Program, it's been around a little bit longer, I think back to 1991, 89 timeframe. We currently have about $40 million sitting in the account at the moment. And we have funded loans, again, as small as $20,000 to as much as $55 million through the state revolving fund program. So, you know, the myth of us only being able to fund 20 million or only working with big guys or only working with small guys, is really just dependent upon the funds that we have in the account. We can actually fund a large range of systems and a large different types, and Nevada's SRF programs are very interested in funding all of them. So as my picture here on the screen illustrates, the revolving fund programs pretty much operate like a bank. We are a bank. We're not a regulator. We don't come in and require you to do anything. We're here to try and help you get funding for what is needed for you to comply with the regulators. We receive grant funds from the feds. We receive state bond funds, I'm sorry, that capitalize the program. We take that money and then lend it out to borrowers. And then when those borrowers repay us, that money comes back into the state as state money, and it revolves continuously, building the account up and allowing us to continue providing loans down the road. So we are primarily a loan program. I will say, though, that since 2009, when our stimulations came out during the Great Recession, the program in Congress had authorized a certain portion of our grants to be distributed as principal forgiveness. And principal forgiveness being the case that since we are a loan program, we can only loan money. So we are awarding a loan that you don't have to repay and you don't pay interest on either. So yes, it sounds like a grant, but because we can't grant money, we're not a grant program, we loan the money out, but it doesn't have any repayment conditions. That money is limited on what Congress says we can use in Nevada, what funds we have available in the current year. Because we are typically a loan program, it is based on that additional appropriation that Congress gives us every year, and it does change. Over the last 3 to 5 years, they've been kind of moving things around a bit on how much they want to appropriate for the programs and how much we have to give out. So we always try to make sure to keep folks informed on how much is available, what's available, what kind of requirements that you have to meet in order to get that funding. But basically, you still have to be a program, you still have to be a system that's eligible, you still have to be a project that's eligible. And so now I want to get a little bit more into why you would even consider coming to the state revolving fund versus another funding source. What makes us unique? Well, we are required and prefer to charge below market interest rates. So a borrower would actually have to go out to the public market and issue a bond to be able to construct their project typically. In our case, Nevada does purchase your debt directly, so you don't have to go to the market and purchase it, but then your interest rate is going to be locked in at much lower than what the market would offer you. We base our interest rates off of the bond buyer index, the 20 bond buyer index, if you are issuing a general obligation bond. If you're issuing a revenue bond, we base it off of the 25 bond buyer index. And basically what we do then is about 30 days prior to the closing of your loan, we're going to look at what the interest rates were that Friday. We're going to take 62.5% of that, and that's going to be your interest rate for the life of the loan. So here I've given you an example of what the last 6 months have looked like for our interest rates. These are live data from the last 6 months. Interest rates have been pretty low, but they do fluctuate every week. So until we are closing your loan, that interest rate is going to continue to change. And it's always best to kind of work with your financial advisors and groups to figure out when your timing is ready and when you're going to be ready to proceed to figure out what interest rate you might be looking at as far as the loan goes there. The other benefit too is drawing funds. When you go out to the market and issue a bond, you usually get all the money today, and then you have to spend it within a certain period of time to avoid arbitrage. With our program, you can draw the funds as you need them. So if you only have $50,000 worth of expenses on the day of closing, well, then that's all you draw, and that's the only amount of principal you start earning or having to repay interest on. So it gives you an opportunity to kind of expand that out a little bit. We also have a 3-year grace period on principal repayment. So once you close your loan, you really don't have to repay your principal for the first 3 years, as long as you're still constructing. If your project is complete or you no longer need any additional funds or what we call de-obligating the funds, then we'll actually start doing your principal repayments earlier. But there is its opportunity to be able to take advantage of just 3 years worth of interest payments first without having to start repaying the principal. Our terms are typically 20 years. And that was because that's how the programs were originally established. And in the state regulations, they're still kind of written that way in the drinking water program. The clean water program actually has some more flexibility there. So we've started allowing some funds to go out as 30-year terms. I work with the Treasurer's Office for the state to figure out how much of funds each year, July 1st, we determine an amount of our funds that we have available in clean water that we will end up making available for the next cycle. That number right now hasn't been determined just yet for this next fiscal year. And again, as I mentioned in my previous slide, we do have some principal forgiveness funds. It's not a repayment. You don't earn interest on it, and you do have to qualify. Our intended use plans, which are required to be prepared to let the public as well as EPA know what we're going to do with our funds, how we're going to manage the funds, and what qualifies for funding. Those are prepared every year. They were finalized this April, and they were posted on our website, and the links to those websites are going to be my last slide here, so you'll have an opportunity to see those. But it will kind of outline which systems are eligible for principal forgiveness funding. We typically focus on the systems that are considered disadvantaged, which would be, by state statute, that is a system that is less than 80% of the MHI for the state's median household income. So if the community's at median household income is less than 80% of the state's median household income, the community is considered disadvantaged. We also do have other ways of qualifying for principal forgiveness funding. They're in a scale. I won't go through them today here, but if you are interested in them, I would encourage you to reach out to me directly, look at our website, take a look at the information there to see how else you can qualify for those. Otherwise, as I mentioned, we've got quite a bit of loan money available, and we're not afraid to use it for smaller systems too. So don't think that we got $40 million, we're only looking for a big project. We're looking for them too, but we're also here to help everybody of every size. So what kind of systems qualify for funding? So basically in the drinking water program, we have some more latitude here. If the system is considered a public water system, community water system, then we can fund them both publicly or privately, whether or not they're for profit or not. They'd have to be community water system though in that case. But for non-community water systems, you would also have to be tax exempt federally. And so we would usually have to check for that to see that you also have filings with the IRS as a federal tax exemption status. We can also fund Native American tribes. And in the clean water program, we're limited specifically to public municipalities that have a jurisdiction over the disposal of sewage, industrial wastes, or other wastes, in interstate agencies and Native American tribes. Now, one little insight that I'd like to share here with you on this is that we have also found ways of being able to help systems that wouldn't necessarily qualify. And I'll use clean water as a perfect example. As you can see on the clean water side, we can really only fund public municipalities, but there are private citizens and private systems that also need support as well. So what we've actually done is we've approached a nearby, or they have approached a nearby public municipality and have partnered with them as a way to try and get a loan as a pass-through in order to help. And in some cases, this is a benefit also for the public municipality. There could be an indirect impact to that public municipality by that private system nearby. So they also have an interest in taking them off their area and bringing them online with the local system. So I don't want this list here to discourage you from not contacting us. If you have any questions at all about the possibility and availability of funding here, do reach out to us, see what we can do. We've had a lot of interest, like with the Truckee Meadows Water Authority on the drinking water side, to do consolidations for some of the local mobile home parks. We've even had the same thing with Las Vegas Valley Water District in the south. And again, we've had the interest in the clean water side too, in the Douglas County area, where we've had a partnership go on there. So we have ways of being able to help out if you don't necessarily qualify directly. We can find perhaps a pass-through way to be able to assist you there. So here's a little bit about some of the systems that we can fund, or some of the projects that we can fund, and they're quite extensive. Drinking water typically is just about anything you can think about in collecting, sampling, distributing, and transmitting drinking water, safe drinking water to a home. Treatment, as well as source issues. But don't forget too, we can also take care of your security issues. You need to put in a fence or cameras. You need to do a backup generator. Those are things that we can also fund as well in the program. And you know, especially when we start getting into more modern issues such as cybersecurity and things of that nature, those kind of things are starting to really start impacting, you know, how water systems operate. So don't want to leave those options out. And we can fund the entire project from planning to construction all the way through. There is no cap on how much we can fund within that project piece there. I will say though that the timing is critical. So a little insight here with this to make sure that all phases of your construction project will be fundable by the SRF program. You need to be working with us early and often. And I'll say that again more than once today because that is a key component for the funders here. And I know my partner funders will also be saying the same thing too. A big insight is to work with us early, frequently. You want to make sure that we are contacted as soon as you know you've got a project, and you want to keep us involved throughout the entire process. So then that way we make sure we don't miss a step that could then jeopardize your ability to get funding, say in a phase of the construction or a component of something because there was a step that was missed. In our clean water program, there's a lot of misconceptions there about what we can fund because they think it's, a lot of systems feel that it's just wastewater treatment. This program is broad. There is a lot of things we can fund in here. In fact, Arizona just replanted a forest with their clean water program, okay? And they did that because of erosion control and runoff. We can even help with a landfill recovery because if the landfill is leaking and causing groundwater issues and things of that nature, causing contamination to the environment. Those are things that we can help fund and rehabilitate in clean water. Stormwater management, non-point source management, we can help fund agricultural best practices and use there. So there is a lot of things that program can do that will help try to keep our waterways clean, our environment clean, and ultimately end up protecting our drinking water, because as we know, water that flows from one source into the river ends up to the next community down the road, or into the groundwater that ends up getting into our wells. So, you know, it's best for us to try and make sure we're addressing all of these needs as much as possible. I do also want to put a note here that on both programs, we can fund consolidations, which would include septic to sewer conversions or well abandonments. We can fund refinancing of any existing debt that you've already funded. We do have some unique requirements for those, but if you've already taken out debt to fund any of these things, we can look at refinancing you at a lower rate to help you save money. So that increases your financial capacity within your program and being able to do more with your money as you go forward. And we can also fund planning and design even on its own. Let's just say you've got a problem, you don't know where to start, you need a preliminary engineering report. You're not ready to go forward to the whole project. We do actually have some smaller loans that we can offer to you that are principal forgiveness actually, that will help you be able to prepare those reports. So if you're interested in those, do contact us, and often. So now this slide here, just want to talk about some of the other sides of things too. Like all banks, as we say we are, there are requirements for us to fund. And as Ariel mentioned in her presentation, there are certain things that we have to follow, even though that we are a federal program because of the federal grants that we receive, but we're state run. So we also have to make sure we follow environmental review requirements, historic preservation requirements, the American Iron and Steel Act, the Davis-Bacon Act, and we have to follow the safe drinking water rules, the Clean Water Act, and then there's also state rules as far as construction, procurement, contracting, things of that nature. So we want you to remember to always contact us early and contact us often throughout this process. Our process to actually get you going forward in the clean water program or the drinking water program is to simply fill out a 3-page pre-application. That's the first process. It doesn't commit you to anything. It just says that you have a project and that you'd be interested in receiving funding, and it adds you to our priority lists. Both of these programs have priority lists, and you are required to be on the priority list in order to receive funding or be eligible for funding from the programs. Those lists are currently open, and we are receiving applications until June 11th of next month, so 2 weeks from now, approximately. So if you are interested in getting on the priority list, again, it's just getting your project on the list. It's getting an estimate on there. It doesn't commit you to moving forward with our program. But if we happen to get stimulus money down the road in the next 6 months, or if you want to start working on a project sooner than later and start talking with us about things, I'd recommend putting out that priority list, our pre-application right now, so we can get you on the priority list, okay? And that would have been the first step there. Then we'll also continue the process down with a letter of intent and a loan application, where we would start doing more review. If your project was ready to proceed, we too would also need to look at the technical parts of it. Is it going to comply with the requirements for either Safe Drinking Water or the Clean Water Act? Do you have permits in place? Is it constructed? Is it being constructed properly? Do you have engineers in place to look at those things? Are those plans being reviewed? And so there's a bunch of stuff that we have to look at that in addition to the funding side. The funding side being that you have reasonable rates. You have rates that are sufficient to support this project as well as your current system. Because as a bank, we can't fund you if you're not going to support the assets that we fund. So you have to have sufficient rates in place in order for us to be able to fund you. And so those are some of the things that our program has. Yes, there are a lot of strings with this stuff, but we're here to help. We've done this stuff a lot, so we're very familiar with how to do it. Just give us a call, but don't wait for us to call you. There's only 5 of us in my office, including myself, and we have 95 projects on our drinking water list, and we have 35 on the clean water list. And we do actually have some systems think that they need to wait for us to call them because they're number 34. No, 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 no. We have a bypass process. If you're on our list and you're ready to proceed, call us, tell us, let us know, keep us involved, because we have a way to be able to actually move you forward, even if you're lower on the list. Just let us know. So the other program that I manage, and that was basically everything for the revolving fund programs, but there is actually a third program that the Office of Financial Assistance manages here at the NDEP, and that is the Capital Improvements Grant Program. Some of you that have been around for a little while may have heard of this as the AB 198 program or the Water Grants Program. It's been around since 1991. It is a state grant program. It's entirely funded by state bond proceeds. So the legislature just introduced yesterday AB 492 that's going to authorize $8 million this biennium, coming up biennium, for the Treasurer's Office to issue the bonds. So once the Treasurer's Office issues the bonds, then I will have money that I will be able to grant to specific systems. Those systems would have to meet certain criteria. You're going to want to contact us. It's also on our website about what systems qualify, and I'm going to go into that in the next slide as well. But this is a little overview. It is not a bank in the sense of it revolves. This is in a sense of this is a direct infusion of cash from the state to a water system. In addition to water systems, we also have individual sewage disposal systems that are eligible, water conservation districts that are available, and irrigation districts that are eligible for funding in this program. It is typically for publicly owned systems, though. The private owned systems are usually not eligible for this program. But it will also help you be able to address any kind of drinking water deficiency that you have. It could also help with septic to sewer conversion processes. It could also help with water conservation in the case of irrigation, wastewater, or tailwater. And it could also consolidate a well to a municipal system in the case of a drought or failing wells, in this case, to be able to help the system remain sustainability. So this is the primary purpose of this program. It was kind of a state-run program before we even had principal forgiveness money in the SRF programs. And it was a way to really try and help the small systems of the state who have already tried to obtain as much funding as they can from other sources as a last resort kind of funding place. The Board for Financing Water Projects is a public board, and they have complete authority over this program on who can get funds. And they've established a scale that staff uses to determine how much grant a system can get. This program never funds 100% of a project. You get a scale percentage, and they usually like to see us partner fund with somebody else too to offset the cost for the entire project, because the entire project has to be demonstrated that it's fundable. We are also looking for shovel ready because these are municipal bonds issued by the state in Nevada. We usually have like a 2-year turnaround time on the bonds. So if we ask for $6 million, I've got to get $6 million spent within 2 years. Or the state could start running into additional costs in the issuance of these funds. So we're really looking for shovel-ready projects that could be moving forward, and we're looking at starting that process. Because of the $8 million, we don't think we'll actually get the proceeds until, say, November, December, January timeframe of this year, when we're going to start those up. So definitely contact us if this is an area where you're interested in funding. We do also have requirements on those programs where a capital replacement reserve account is put in place. Again, sufficient rates are needed to ensure that you're not running your system into the ground. The board does not like that. The board wants to make sure that you are being responsible with operating your system and charging a sufficient rate in order for you to get grant money from the state that every citizen in Nevada is repaying. So it's kind of going back to the responsibility matrices there. And then there's also public works requirements that go along with any public project with this program. And so with that, I just wanted to show this last slide here. This is our websites. My contact information is on here as well. We also have a general email account box down at the bottom for questions that any of me or my 5 members on my team would be able to see. So if you got a question for any of us, I've got a professional engineer, I have an accountant, I have a management analyst, all on staff. We all are part of this process on a daily basis, so we have availability to be able to answer any of your questions if you have any for us. And with that, that concludes my presentation.
Great summary, Jason. Very detailed. Thank you so much. One question, we are a little short on time here, but one question for you. How do you prioritize the priority list?
So the priority list is, there is a specific ranking criteria for the priority list. The drinking water priority lists requirements are listed in the state regulations. The clean water priority lists are listed in the intended use plan and referenced in the regulations. And so there's some details in there that I won't get into today since we are short on time, but that's where they can be found. And if you are specifically interested in what those are, just contact me and I'll be happy to share that information.
Great. And then one more short question for you that came in. Can the state revolving fund money be used for fire flow needs?
We are not allowed to primarily fund fire flow. It can be part of a project, but it cannot be the reason for the project. So, I mean, we're talking a very small percentage. If you're redoing your system and you need fire hydrants, then that's usually okay. But if you're doing it because you need fire flow, no, we can't do that. It has to actually be addressing a safe drinking water compliance issue or storage capacity issues and things of that nature.
Great. Good to have you, Jason. Thanks so much for your time and input.
Thank you. You're welcome.
We're gonna move on to Cheryl now. Stay with us. I'm gonna introduce Cheryl in just a minute, and then we're gonna take about a 5-minute break before we move on to these other funding opportunities we're bringing to you today. So Cheryl, as you get set up, I will go ahead and give your introduction. Cheryl Couch has been with the USDA Rural Development for over 28 years and has been the Community Programs Director since 2014. With USDA's RD community programs, she has worked directly with communities, nonprofit organizations, and tribes to finance water, wastewater, solid waste, and community facility projects throughout rural Nevada. And with that, I can let you take it away, Cheryl, but I'm not seeing your camera. Slide is coming on.
And then Cheryl, you should be good once you swap your display settings like you were doing.
Okay.
Perfect.
That's great.
Right.
Thanks so much, Cheryl.
Just trying to figure out which buttons to press or not. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Cheryl Couch, the Community Programs Director for USDA Rural Development. We are a federal agency, and under community programs, we have two I manage 2 programs. So our water environmental programs are housed under our rural utilities service, and then community facilities loans and grants are housed under the rural housing service. So USDA Rural Development is a mission area, and the programs are managed under the specific agencies. And the reason I'm including community facilities loan and grant information is through that program, we can help systems fund those major pieces of equipment they might need. So to jump right in, for water and environmental programs, who's eligible in rural areas? So I kind of say by the nature of our agency or mission area name, USDA Rural Development, we're working only in the rural areas of the state. So for water and environmental programs, it's communities with a population of 10,000 or under. And those eligible applicants are the cities, counties, general improvement district, et cetera, not-for-profit organizations. So if you're a water cooperative or an HOA that owns and operates a water or wastewater system, you're likely eligible. And then also federally recognized Indian tribes. Currently in Nevada, well, throughout the US, rural development is still using the 2006 through 10 American Community Survey data. It will likely be the start of the new fiscal year or October 1st when we start using the 2014 through 2018 data set. And that will determine the median household income, and then obviously the updates to the population of the communities that we can serve. But that's the most recent information we have. And so then how can our funds be used for the water environmental program? So in broad strokes, for drinking water, it can be the source, treatment, storage, distribution. For wastewater, it's sewer collection, transmission, treatment, and disposal. Solid waste, collection, disposal, closure. Stormwater, again, it's the collection and the transmission or disposal. We can also incorporate, as you're evaluating your project, look at those energy efficiencies. Overall eligible project costs, and it really is tied to just about everything that it takes to fund the project. Legal, administrative, those fiscal advisory costs, the engineering, so the design, construction management, and inspection services are all eligible. Design is reimbursable. So as the project, once we fund the project, we can reimburse the cost for the design services. We just can't close our loan or advance grant funds to pay for design services. So it may be necessary, and this is where it's really great that if we can partner with the SRF or with CDBG, that if their funds can be used to pay for design, then the applicant or borrower doesn't have to maybe go get that bridge loan or front the money out of their own resources to pay for design. If they do, however, it's totally reimbursable out of project funds. Can also be used to help pay for that environmental document. If you need a cultural resource report done to comply with SHPA requirements or consultation, it can pay for that, pay for the environmental report. If you need to acquire lands or water rights, those are eligible. Can't be the sole purpose of a project. We just had an inquiry recently from someone about acquiring just water rights, and it can't be the primary purpose of the project, but if it's identified as a need of a construction project, then it's eligible. The labor and material cost for construction, including meters. If we generally, our regulations require us to have our applicants attempt to obtain interim financing for the construction period. So if the loan is over $500,000, so generally nowadays all loans are over $500,000. So the applicant has to attempt to obtain the interim financing, and if they can, then the interest on that is part of the project cost and will reimburse out of the permanent loan closing. We can also help purchase existing facilities and that's either to improve service or to prevent that loss of service. So for example, if in your community there's a small HOA or a small private system that just can't function any longer, and the community, the town or district, whatever, can acquire that system to either improve the service or prevent the loss of service. We have a few limitations. We can't do what we would call a combined stormwater sanitary sewer project, so it can't all end up at the sewer treatment plant. USDA, or one of our kind of mottos, is we have to finance facilities which are modest in size, design, and cost. So it can't be overly designed or overly extreme for the community. We also cannot fund developer-driven projects. So if a new subdivision wants to be created within your community, we can help you extend the water or sewer lines to the development, but we can't fund for the developer the cost of the infrastructure within the development. And we also can't help or fund that industrial user like pre-treatment type services. And then because it has to serve that rural community, we can't fund a portion of a project which serves an urban area. We have fixed rate loans. It's usually for a 40-year term. However, if the system has the ability to make additional payments or to internally amortize it over a shorter period of time, you can do that with no penalty. We also have a tiered rate structure based on the median household income of the community. So it's what we call a poverty rate, an intermediate rate, and then a market rate. So communities that would be eligible for poverty rate are those that are below 80% of the state non-metro household income. And then the project also resolves a health or sanitary issue or regulatory requirement. Most communities in Nevada are eligible for our intermediate rate. And then those communities that are eligible for market rate are systems that are above the state non-metro median household income criteria. So you may not be eligible for grant funding, but as long as you're a rural system, you're likely eligible for loan funding. That also impacts your ability or your eligibility for grant funding too. Our direct loans, they're generally secured with a water or sewer revenue bond, potentially a general obligation or GO bond. Nonprofit organizations, we generally close those loans with a promissory note and a deed of trust, potentially an assignment of income or a financing statement filing too. We also have a guaranteed loan program, and the applicant and lender then negotiate the rate and term, and USDA guarantees that loan. As I mentioned, and Jason mentioned too, we are primarily a lender. We do have grant funding available, but primarily our projects are going to be funded with loan funds. Our allocation of funds is generally, so each state receives an allocation of funds, of loan funds and grant funds, and our allocation is generally 75% loan, 25% grant. And so as we're making loans and grants to community, we're kind of staying within that threshold also. Even though a community may be eligible for up to a maximum of 75% grant funding, it's not likely that I have that much in my allocation of funds, but we do offset that with a lower interest rate, so it does help. We also cannot use our grant funds to help subsidize user rates, and systems must demonstrate that financial need to obtain the grant funding. So we have to do an internal calculation. We have to look at some similar systems. We collect data on systems throughout the state, and we're comparing similar systems to similar systems. So based on population, median household income, if it's a water project and maybe their source of water, do they get their water from wells or do they get it from a spring? Do they have to pump water from 5 miles away or 20 miles away? Do they have to treat for arsenic or something else? For wastewater, are they a pond system or mechanical plant, et cetera? So we're comparing apples, we're trying to compare as close as we can, apples to apples and oranges to oranges, but not say a community like Austin to Winnemucca, for example. And then grant eligibility again is tied to the median household income of the community. And in order to obtain grant funding, and especially if I would have to request funds through our national office, they're going to be looking for water or sewer rates that are at least equal to or greater than 1.5% of the community's median household income. If I can fund it out of my own state allocation, I have a little more flexibility, but not if I would happen to need to request funds from the national office. So in order to obtain funding, or how do you start this process to apply for funding to USDA? So we really do need that preliminary engineering report that identifies the issues with the system. USDA RD also has an e-PER system, so an electronic PER. Your engineer needs to register and obtain a user ID, but then they can go through and they can submit combined PERs. So if you have a water and waste project that you need to address, or if you have water only or wastewater only, so they can identify what type of PER they want to start with, and then it just narrows down all of the information that they need to complete, or yes, to complete in order for us to get a complete PER. You also need to identify so if you may have a pretty comprehensive PER that's identifying numerous issues that need to be resolved, but then you may need to narrow it down to what's the most critical, what has to be addressed first. You may need help in evaluating your eligibility. So we recommend initially, contact the agency. Let's have these conversations up front. And we are happy to talk with you about, just here's what we're thinking about. And, honestly, if we're not the best source for you, we may direct you to Jason's program or start you towards CDBG or some other source, as maybe this is a better avenue, but it helps to have those conversations up front. And then as we're talking about this, what we think the project's going to be, it helps to determine that level of environmental review. For our agency, if a project consists of just strictly replacement of a facility, so if you have a storage tank and it's no longer functioning or in service or is on imminent failure, and you just need to build a new one, and you're going to build it essentially at the same location, that would more than likely be a categorical exclusion for us. Same for if it's a water line replacement project. If you're going to just replace lines and you're essentially going in the exact same location, that's categorical exclusion for us, wouldn't require an environmental report, and likely would not require consultation with SHPO. However, if it's a project that does require new construction, new ground disturbance, you're going to be in a completely new area, you're adding new facilities that you haven't had before, then it's likely would need that environmental report and that consultation with the State Historic Preservation Office. But it helps to have that conversation early. And then we also recommend using our online application system, RD Apply, to start that process. So to jump into that, how can you apply? We do recommend RD Apply. It's a new online application. You have to register and obtain that user ID, and then you can assign roles to those people that are assisting you with this project, like your consulting engineer, or maybe your accountant, or who's the primary person that's going to organize and submit all the application data, but then that authorized representative, like the mayor or the president of your association, who has to sign those documents. Other ways to apply too are, we'll still accept a paper application and a preliminary engineering report and environmental report, etc. We will assist you with whatever or through the application process, regardless of how you ought to apply. We just do recommend RD Apply, however. And if USDA staff are not available, we can direct some of the technical assistance providers to assist you with that process, all the way through meeting the conditions of the letter of conditions as we do our underwriting and funding determination, and then helping you meet those conditions as a requirement to obtain the loan and grant funding. And when can you apply? Well, we accept applications continuously, and funding's generally provided on a first come, first served basis. We do have a priority, we assign priority points to projects, but as long as we have funds in our allocation and funds available, like I said, we generally fund on a first come, first served basis. Smallest communities with the smallest population and the lowest median household income do receive priority, however. And our funding is based on the federal fiscal year, which begins October 1st. However, we may not receive our state allocation of funding until later in the fiscal year, whenever Congress gets a budget or a continuing resolution or some funding mechanism passed. Then we'll receive our state allocation of funds. However, our national office always is able to retain some funds, carry them over from year to year, and recapture some funds. So if a project comes in, an application on October 1st and needs funding, chances are good that we are able to obtain those funds from our national office, even though we may not have them in our state allocation of funds. So again, in order to apply, we do need that preliminary engineering report that describes the project. What's the problem, what's the solution, and what's the cost estimate for that facility. And again, your engineer can do that using our PER system. Like the other federal agencies and even the SRF, projects do, I said the level of environmental may vary depending on the type of project, but the NEPA process must be completed before we can obligate the funds. I've included a link to our 7 CFR 1970 environmental regulation, and it provides information on what would qualify as a categorical exclusion, what might be just an environmental report, and then what would further require an environmental assessment. We do have other funds available at the state level. We don't receive a specific allocation of funds for these different programs, but we administer them and underwrite them and accept the applications at the state level. So we have pre-development planning grants and what we call a search grant. These grants are available for the pre-development costs. So if you need that preliminary engineering report or the environmental report, either the PPG or the search grant could potentially help. The search grant can also be used for some pre-design type costs, so it's a little more flexible. There's a maximum of $30,000 available for each grant, and they can only go to communities. So when I say rural, we're talking rural communities with a population of 2,500 or less, and then the median household income, and this is based on current data, has to be less than $50,766, and that will change come October 1st. And then another source of funds is what we call the Emergency and Imminent Community Water Assistance Grants, or our acronym is ECWAG. So these are available to communities that may be experiencing some level of, or experienced a disaster. So fire, flood, and what might be critical this year is drought. So if your system is experiencing a decline in the quantity or quality of water, ECWAG funding may be available. So eligible communities must have a median household income at or below the state non-metro, and that's currently $63,458. Again, that will change October 1st. And priority is given to communities with a smaller population of 3,000 or less, but communities with a population of up to 10,000 are eligible to apply. And we do have a streamlined process for that. So if it's you know, your source has been affected and you need to drill a new well and you're doing a like project, that environmental process is streamlined. We have a very streamlined preliminary engineering report process. So it's basically a one-pager describing here's the problem, here's the solution, here's the estimated cost for this project. So the ECWAGs and the PPG search grants are very streamlined application. As I mentioned, we've got some pretty strong funding partnerships, especially with the State Revolving Fund, both the Drinking Water and the Clean Water Program, and with Community Development Block Grant Program. Those are both, like I said, that really helps with a lot of those pre-development costs, such as the design engineering to carry the project through that phase and then on into construction. We partner also with the Indian Health Service for tribal projects. IHS may do the preliminary engineering report and also serve as the design engineer on projects. And then RD can help move some of those projects that might not be on IHS's priority list a little further along if we provide the funding. And in the past, we have partnered with U.S. Army Corps of Engineers on various projects throughout Nevada. And then another source is, you know, obviously the applicant and state or local or foundation funds. So if there's some other source that you can contribute, it can all come into the project. I'm going to be real brief on this community facilities presentation. So the primary goal of community facilities program is to, well, improve that quality of life for rural residents, and by providing funding for essential community facilities. So when you're thinking of facility, maybe you're thinking generally a building, but it can go for vehicles and equipment. So eligible applicants, again, are nonprofits, units of local government, federally recognized tribes. We have a direct and guaranteed loan program, and we do have grants available. The one difference, we have the population threshold is higher, up to 20,000 in population we can serve, but must serve primarily rural residents. So again, how can funds be used? We can purchase real estate or buildings and new construction or rehab renovation. So for example, if you're a water system and you need a new shop building or maintenance facility, or you need a new office building, our community facilities loan funding can help with those buildings, the construction. Or if you need, you know, those major pieces of equipment, a backhoe or a road grader, that back truck, garbage truck, etc. And then also if you need to improve streets, roads, bridges, dams, irrigation districts, our community facilities loan funds can be used for those type of projects too. As I mentioned, we also do have community facility grants. I get a little less than 200,000 generally annually, so our grants are small. 50,000 is our maximum grant, and they generally range somewhere between $15,000 to $30,000. So we're the match. So if you have some of the funding available, we may be able to come in and provide the balance, or just help fill that gap. We're not likely going to be the primary source, but you know, if you need some smaller pieces of equipment, we may be an option to help with that type of project. Primary, a lot of the broader scope are healthcare, so we can do hospitals, clinics, ambulances, etc. Schools, we can fund the actual school building itself, build a brand new school, do school buses, classrooms, dormitories, libraries, etc. Whoops. Again, the community. Sorry.
Cheryl, this is Maureen. This is such great information, but I am going to ask you to wrap it up in the next minute or two, please, so we can have enough time for everybody. Thank you.
Yeah, so the rates and terms are similar for real estate, up to 30 years, for equipment, generally 3 to 15 years. And the security is very similar to the water and environmental. Since the presentation is available, you'll be able to look this over. Again, we require, if it's construction of a facility, we need that preliminary architect's report. We may need a financial feasibility report. And again, we have to go through that environmental process. And here at the end, we have our contact information. So I'm in Carson City at our state office. Maria is my senior specialist. She is out in our Elko office. Pierre is new to our program, relatively new to Nevada, but he's been on board for the last few months. We have a new state engineer, Dean Sediono, and then Jenny is our community programs assistant / specialist. So all our contact right there. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Cheryl. That's so much helpful information to have and great opportunities for people. We have one question that came in and then we can take a break. Let's see, it's how long does it take between starting an application and closing a grant generally, or a range?
If it's solely a grant, that could be literally anywhere from 2 weeks to a month. If it's a loan for a water sewer project, we're probably looking more at somewhere between 60 to 90 days.
Okay, great. Well, yeah, thanks for joining us today and taking the time to share. We're going to go ahead and take a 5-minute break, folks. We've got 3 more funding opportunities from Nevada Governor's Office of Economic Development, from Rural Community Assistance Corporation, and then Bureau of Reclamation's Office of Policy and Administration. So it's I've got that it's 2:56 right now. Why don't we plan on coming back at 3:01, I guess that would be. So we'll talk to you very soon. Nevada funding webinar, folks, attendees. We're going to get started in about 1 minute. I have it's 3 o'clock. We'll get started at 3:01. And then Jessica Sanders, if you're out there, if you could turn your camera on, and Tess will be giving you controls in a little bit as I introduce you. Thanks. Okay, I have it 3:01. Hope everybody got a drink of water or a coffee and a good stretch. Off to more opportunities. So I want to introduce Jessica Sanders. Jessica began her service with the Governor's Office of Economic Development in May of 2015 as the CDBG Program Specialist. She just recently became the Community Development Block Grant, that's CDGB, Program Administrator in November of 2020. Prior to working at GOED, she worked for the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. Jessica has had over 10 years of grant management experience. So with that, I'll let you take it away. Jessica, thanks for being here.
Thank you very much. Okay, could you see my screen?
Yep, looks great.
Okay, thank you. So I am Jessica Sanders. I'm the program specialist, or I'm sorry, the program administrator for the CDBG program. What is CDBG? It's the Community Block Grant Program. It's authorized by the Title I of the Housing and Community Development Act of 1974. And in 1981, it was amended to include the Non-Entitlement Program, which is the program that I run. It's administered nationally by the Department of Housing and Urban Development. And in Nevada, we're housed in the Governor's Office of Economic Development. So there's two CDBGs. There's the entitlement side and then the non-entitlement side. And like I said, we run the non-entitlement side, which is the rural community side of it. And so what non-entitlement is that cities with fewer than 50,000 people and counties with fewer than 200,000 people. And the allocation comes directly to the state, and then we disperse that out to our general local governments. The entitlements are more urban areas, bigger areas that get HUD funding directly. Those are going to be like Clark County, the city of Reno, those type of places get their funding directly from HUD. So HUD has 3 outcomes: to expand economic opportunities, to provide suitable living environment, and to provide decent housing. These are our cities and counties that can actually apply to CDBG. Clark County, Reno, Henderson, those are going to be your entitlement areas. So rural Nevada is really where we're going to be focused more at. So the cities and counties can always sponsor grants. You would just need to contact your city or your county and find out who your grant administrator is to talk to them about those. The grant agreement is always going to be with the city or the county and the state of Nevada. And then the city or county will then have a subrecipient agreement with their sponsor, whoever they're sponsoring. So the city and county's responsibility is really, they're going to do citizen participation. So for CDBG, they need to have at least 3 public meetings. The first 2 public meetings are really going to go over the program, what their activities are that they're looking at. They're going to be calling for any people that want to be sponsored by them, and they're really going to be carrying out those the grant agreements and making sure that they're complying with state and federal requirements. The state's responsibility is really, we're setting the funding priorities, we're selecting the allocation, and we're selecting those funds to go to the cities and the counties. We do have an advisory committee board that all applications go to our advisory committee, and our advisory committee is the ones that will review and they rank those applications, and then they will make recommendations to our executive director. We're also making sure that our units of local government are really complying with state and federal regulations, similar to USDA and to NDEP. We have federal regulations that we have to follow. We have to do NEPA, so environmental reviews, and Davis-Bacon. We're all following those same regulations. So for CDBG to be eligible, you must fall within at least one of the national objectives and have an eligible activity. So the national objectives is to benefit 51% or more of a low to moderate income persons, to aid in the prevention of slum or blight, and then a recent urgent need. So for the 51% LMI, which is the low to moderate income, you can do it under 4 ways: either an area-wide benefit, a limited clientele, housing, or jobs. For an area-wide benefit, it's just really, it's the whole area is going to be benefited by this project. And then low moderate income clientele is really, we're looking more of like ADA projects are going to be the low moderate income clienteles. To address slum and blight, you have 2 ways you can do it, either an area basis or a spot basis. If you're doing an area basis, it does need to be a designated area that has been designated by the local government. And then the spot basis is just anything that's outside of that designated area. Oops, sorry. And then for urgent need, we don't do a lot of projects with urgent need, and that is just because we actually get CDBG CV funding. There is also CDBG DR funding, which is disaster recovery funding, and so we don't typically use our funding, our regular CDBG, for those types of things. But if you do have an urgent need project, please feel free to give us a call, and we're more than happy to talk those projects through with you. So the project has fit into one of the national objectives. Now you must make sure that it fits into an eligible activity. These right here are really all of our eligible activities that we have. Public facility is really going to be the one that any water and sewer projects are going to be under. Like Cheryl had said about planning grants, we at CDBG, we can pay for those PERs, we can pay for design, we can pay for environmental assessment. So really think of us when you're wanting to do those planning projects. And these slides just go through some eligible activities that you can do. So again, the eligible activities are water and sewer facilities. We do those. Demolition, again, the planning activities that you're doing. For CDBG, any project has to have some type of level of environmental review. So most of the construction projects that we have are going to have either a categorically excluded subject to, or they're going to have an environmental assessment going to them. And then these are just types of projects that we've done in the past. The water and the wastewater, we have a couple of projects right now that we're doing that are for water and wastewater, and then planning grants that we're doing in sidewalks and streets and sidewalks. So this is, we actually, at the end of March, we just awarded our 2021 grants. And so from 1982 to 2021, we have spent over $100 million in CDBG funds to our rural areas. So I always think that that's kind of a great thing to look at that and see that we've spent that in rural Nevada. This is just our grant cycle that we actually just completed. So for 2021, we did receive 22 proposed projects from 8 cities and counties. Their eligibility was due in October. And of those 22 projects, 19 of them were able to go on to the application phase. And the 19 were requesting a little over $7 million. And so in February, we received our allocation of $3.5 million. So you see, it's pretty competitive for us to get those grants out. The nice thing about CDBG is that we can be a match to other federal grants, and we do not require a match. CDBG does not require any matching funds. We always like to see some type of matching funds, but it's not a requirement. This is just our application timeline. So July 1 of 2021, we have an online grant system called Zoom Grants that will open for eligibility. And eligibility is from July 1 to the middle of October. And that's when our grant administrators are really going to be out there holding their public meetings, calling for subrecipients or calling for any projects that are out there that they want to come forward. And we really ask, similar to what Jason said, is contact us, talk with the grant administrators. Let's make sure that these projects are eligible. And so in mid-October, eligibility is due. If the project is eligible and it has been approved, then it will go on to our application phase, and then applications are due mid-February. And then in late March, we'll have an advisory committee meeting, and then those grants will not actually have a start date until July 1st. So for CDBG, the application process truly is a year-long process. But throughout that whole process, we really stress being in contact with our office, being in contact with grant administrators and your cities or your counties, and so that we can make sure that your project is eligible and it's moving forward. So that's actually the gist of CDBG. I only have one program compared to the others that had a couple of different programs. This is our contact information. Again, we're always here to answer any questions that you may have. Please feel free to call, email, and we'll be happy to get with you guys and have any conversations that we need. And again, we work very closely with NDP and USDA.
Thanks so much, Jessica. So great to see what a neat kind of collaboration you have with USDA and the State Revolving Fund in Nevada, and that's pretty cool. I don't have any questions that have come in, so if you want to hang on, maybe more will come in a little later, and we'll ask you if they do. So thanks
Perfect.
again for joining us. And
Thank you.
I will go ahead and introduce Georgianne from RCAC. And Georgianne, are you on? I'm not able to see cameras. If you could give me
I
your
am.
phone.
I just came on.
Okay, great. And so Tess should be giving you access to your screen to share your screen in a minute. Okay, and I'll go ahead and give you your introduction. Georgianne works for the Rural Community Assistance Corporation, or RCAC, as a loan officer for the Southwest region. That's Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah. And she says, I am committed to changing lives through quality service to all clients I am in contact with. I am a loan officer with RCAC, a nonprofit helping to create vibrant, healthy, and enduring rural communities by underwriting and servicing a portfolio of loans. Prior to coming to work for RCAC, I have over 30 years of experience in banking and financial services. So thanks so much for joining us, and I will let you have at it.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Maureen. Can you see my screen, my presentation?
Yep, looks great.
Okay, perfect. So Rural Community Assistance Corporation, also known as RCAC because it's a lot easier. We are a nonprofit founded over 40 years ago, back in 1978. We do provide training, technical assistance, and some financial resources and advocacy for rural communities only. Excuse me, our mission is to help create vibrant, healthy, and enduring rural communities throughout the West. Excuse me. So the list here is some of our lending programs. We are a lender, and well, we do technical assistance as well, but I'm in the loan fund side, so just on the lending part of it. So we have several programs that we provide loans for. The environmental infrastructure, which is where the water systems would come under play. We also do affordable housing development, economic and leadership development, community development finance community facility loans, small business loans, and household water wells for individuals in certain areas. The people that we work with, the eligibility is other nonprofit corporations. We do a lot with the tribal communities, also any public entities, so any city or state governments, municipalities. Our criteria is, of course, that they must be in a rural community. That's typically under 50,000 population. The affordability that's on the slide is just for our housing programs. So we are, like some of Jason and Cheryl had talked about, the funds and the grants and Wifi that they provide. We are basically a short-term lender. So if you receive a loan or a grant, for example, from USDA, and you need to get a bridge loan or a gap loan, that's where we can step in and help you on that. So our rates and terms for our water systems, we go up to 3 years. The interest rate on our short-term loans is 5% if the term is up to 24 months, and it's 5.25% if it's up to 36 months. Typically, as I said, we just do the short-term loans, and then the loan is then paid off by the USDA grant or the USDA loan or whatever your funder is for the long-term funding. With our rates and fees, they're pretty simple. It's 1% loan fee if no construction is involved, and then 1 1/8 if any loan funds will be used for construction. So we do the bridge or pre-development loans if you need a loan for the design work, right? Any pre-development like that, any environmental reports we can do that. Also the interim or construction loans. We just basically have the funds available so that you can pay your contractors and then get reimbursed when the USDA loan or the other, whoever your permanent lender is on that. Our process to apply is really simple, and I will echo what everybody else has said. If you have any questions, if you're not sure, please give me a call, send me an email. That's what I'm here to do. So our website, which is rcac.org, that has a list of all of our loan fund programs, and there's different types of loans within each program, so it can be a little confusing if you're not sure, but I'm here to help with that. There are brochures that go through, like our environmental infrastructure loans. There's a 2-page brochure that'll give you more information on that program. There's also on the website will be a link to the application and a checklist of all documents that are required. In some cases, we do have technical assistance, people that are available to help, complete the application or go through if you have to do a rate study or other things like that. I personally am not involved in the technical assistance. I do work with the people in RCAC who do the technical assistance, but I myself don't do that. So it's really pretty short, to the point. There's my information on the screen. I know you're going to get a copy of all of this, and we're here to help, again, rural communities. That's all that we do. And if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer.
So good to have you with us, Georgianne. I do want to mention that RCAC is actually one of the environmental finance centers and part of the Efcn network. They're located in, they cover Region 10, So that's Oregon, Washington, and Alaska. And even though they're the Region 10 environmental financer, just like so many of the other EFCs, do work throughout the country in that. So it's really kind of intended to be a collaboration.
Nice.
And actually, RCAC was the one who contacted our office and had suggested that we become an EFC too. So it's great to have that partnership. I don't have any
Wonderful.
questions for you at this point, but I
Perfect.
so much appreciate having you come, and I hope that that was informative for people, and they'll reach out to you. And I like how I appreciate that you reminded folks that, please contact me. We're trying to get that out in the
Please.
community for today of there's people here that can help you and have the funding and want to walk you through this process.
Absolutely.
So take care. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Last but not least, Robin, thanks so much for hanging on with us
Spelled
for the
my name wrong.
afternoon. I hope it was helpful. And okay, I can see you, and I think Tess is probably going to give you access to share your screen. So I'll go ahead and give the introduction. This is Robin Graber. She's a program analyst in Reclamation's Office of Policy and Administration in Denver, Colorado. Graber is the Water Smart Grants Small Scale Water Efficiency Projects Program Coordinator and manages the Water Smart Cooperative Watershed Management Program. In this position, she responds to congressional inquiries, develops and maintains multi-million-dollar annual budgets, develops agency policy and program funding opportunities, and coordinates and communicates with stakeholders and internal staff to support the planning and implementation of these programs. Graber joined Reclamation in 2016 after graduating from the University of Maryland with her MS in Conservation Biology and Sustainability, where she focused on water resource management. She previously worked with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services Aquatic Invasive Species Branch as a student consultant and as a laboratory technician at Florida State University. Graber received her BA in Biology and Environmental Studies from Lake Forest College in Lake Forest, Illinois. So with that, thanks for joining us, and go ahead.
Thanks, Maureen. All right, so I hope everyone is hanging in there. So again, I am a program analyst in the Water Resources and Planning Office. Our office is in Denver or Lakewood, but obviously I'm currently at home, Colorado. And we manage what is overarching the Water Smart program. And we'll get into that a little bit more. So just a quick outline. So we have a handful of Water Smart programs, and I will basically touch on several of those. And it will be a very high level discussion of each of the programs, because we could probably spend at least 20 minutes speaking about each of those programs. And then we'll talk briefly about application tips, the schedule for the fiscal year 2022 funding opportunities, and provide some additional resources. So going back to the Water Smart program, this is an overarching program that is mostly composed of grant opportunities, but we do have some other programs that are cooperative agreement focused, where Reclamation does play more of a role in those programs. So within Water Smart, which is this large umbrella program, we have several programs, and within those programs we have several funding opportunities within many of them. So there's the Basin Study Program. The Basin Study Program focuses on looking at water supply and demand at a larger basin level. We have the Title 16 program, which focuses on water recycling and reuse. Water Smart Grants is another semi-umbrella program that has several funding opportunities within it, but it focuses on water conservation and efficiency projects. There are, some of our regional programs or regional offices offer a water conservation field service program, which is for planning and design of water conservation projects. We do have a drought response program, which is specifically focused on planning and then implementing projects focused around drought. And then there's the Cooperative Watershed Management Program, which is focused around watershed groups and planning in smaller watersheds. So this is a lot of different programs. And so
overall, a couple key things to remember about these programs. There's going to be some intricacies for each of the individual programs, but overarching, there's a few things I want you to know before we jump into discussion of each of the funding opportunities. So in terms of eligibility, most of our funding opportunities are open to states, tribes, water districts, irrigation districts, and other entities with water power delivery authority. Within that category, we do include more local government entities, so municipalities and county governments are eligible to apply. And then also nonprofit conservation organizations that are partnering with one of those entities that I mentioned previously are also now eligible under many of our funding opportunities. Not all of them, but many. And this is a relatively new development for the program. It was due to some changes to public laws that we used to implement the program at the end of 2020. And so fiscal year 2021 was really where we saw some of those changes come into effect. And they'll be also within the 2022 funding opportunities. Another thing to note that is overarching for most of these funding opportunities is that most of them require a non-federal Costure. And in most cases, it is 50% of the total project costs or more. There are certain, reclamation can provide a different amount of money under each of the funding opportunities, and so we'll discuss that a little bit more. And so, you might say, what is non-federal Costure? Well, really, it's anything that is non-federal. So you can use state grants and state loans. Some of the other resources that have been discussed here today would be good sources of non-federal Costure. In many cases, even federal loans, as long as they do not have a forgiveness clause in them, can also be used as non-federal Costure. So if you have any questions about, whether a loan can or cannot be used as non-federal Costure, you can feel free to reach out to us and we can get some more information on that. Also, your expenses. So if your organization is going to be doing some of the installation or construction for an implementation project, or is going to be providing staff time for planning, that can also be used as non-federal Costure contribution. The third thing I wanted to highlight before we jump into things further is that we typically can't fund normal operations, maintenance, and replacement. And so we do have kind of our own little bar for what is considered normal operations, replacement, and maintenance. But essentially, we have to be funding for these construction type projects, some type of upgrade. So we can't just be replacing the same equipment that is already there or the same structure that is already there with a new one. It has to be some type of upgrade to the system that is going to improve your water management ability. All right, so the way I'm going to walk through these funding opportunities, and I guess, just to make sure everyone is clear, most of these are for grants. And so, we're not providing loans under the WaterSmart program, and most of them are grant programs. And then in some cases, reclamation would enter into a cooperative agreement with you as the recipient for very specific programs where reclamation has more involvement. But how I'm going to discuss these programs today is to break it down into some opportunities we have for planning, opportunities for more science and tool development, and then opportunities for on-the-ground projects. And we'll discuss a little bit some opportunities in each of these categories. The idea behind the WaterSmart program is that, you can come and do some planning and prepare and design and then prepare for implementation of the project. So we'll talk about a few planning funding opportunities first. So the first one I want to talk about is the drought contingency planning. This is a planning program that is one of our few programs that is not, that we would be entering into, Reclamation would be entering into a cooperative agreement with the recipient. There are some more stringent requirements for what the drought contingency plan needs to look like and what components it needs to include in that planning document. And so Reclamation does have more involvement in the review of these plans. But these are, you know, if you have, if you want to do planning for drought in your area, this may be a good place to look. It can also be used to update existing plans. It does require 50% non-federal cost share or greater, like most of our programs. In some cases, you can receive a cost share reduction or a cost share waiver for this program. And then, you know, you can get in touch if you have more questions about what that would look like, and I would put you in touch with the coordinator for that specific program. Under this program, Reclamation will provide up to $200,000. So if you request $200,000, you would need to provide $200,000 in non-federal cost share, unless you were able to receive a waiver or a reduction. The second planning program I wanted to touch on is the Cooperative Watershed Management Program, what we call Phase 1. So this is a grant program. We can provide up to $100,000 to recipients under this program. And this is, I think, our only program where we do not require a non-federal cost share. So you can come to us through this program and you would not need to provide non-federal cost share. It is a fairly specialized program though. So really the purpose is for the development of watershed groups, which are these grassroots local entities. They're non-regulatory and they're composed of a diverse set of stakeholders. In some cases, we see that these groups want to be a little bit more loosely formed and be more of a forum for stakeholders to come together and do planning, collaborative planning in a particular watershed. These watersheds are typically approximately 8-digit HUC sized, but they can be, you know, slightly smaller or larger, but we try to stay away from very large basins. So it's really focused on these local watershed group development. And so we can fund watershed group development activities, outreach to stakeholders, meetings, you know, coalition building activities. We can fund gathering of general data on the watershed, a small amount of actual water quality monitoring or other types of monitoring in the watershed, development of a watershed restoration plan for that watershed by that watershed group, and then watershed management project design. So there, you know, it is fairly specialized, but if you are an organization that would like to sponsor the development of a watershed group, or if you are a watershed group yourself, then this might be a good funding opportunity for you to come to for some watershed restoration planning activities. For all of these programs, we do evaluate them based on a set of evaluation criteria that we put forth in the funding opportunities. And they're all fairly similar. So, you know, they all have their distinct evaluation criteria, but they're all focused on what are the benefits of the project going to be, you know, what is stakeholder collaboration going to look like, who is supporting the project, if it's for an implementation project, what are the plans that support the project. The last planning funding opportunity I want to mention is the Water Marketing Strategy Grants. So this is a relatively new funding opportunity. It's a few years old, and this is where you would have, you'd use this funding opportunity if there are, you know, maybe water rights that want to be moved around, if you want to make a plan for a market for which, you know, water rights buyers and sellers could use to move water to different places. The idea is to try to help prevent shortages and prevent conflict and get water to where it needs to be. So this again, similar to the Cooperative Watershed Management Program, we can pay for outreach and partnership building under this funding opportunity. And it's for scoping and planning for the development of an actual water market. And the development of a water marketing strategy document. And in some cases, we can also fund pilot activities for the actual movement of water. We offer up to $200,000 for 2-year projects and $400,000 for 3-year projects under this funding opportunity. And it does also have a 50% cost share. So I want to briefly just touch on a couple funding opportunities, resources for development of science and tools. The main funding opportunity I want to focus is our applied science grants funding opportunity. This is a grant program. It is relatively new. And the purpose, it's really focused on improving and enhancing modeling capabilities, developing forecasting tools, and improving access to water resource data. So it's really data focused and modeling focused. A 50% non-federal cost share again is required for this one, and we offer up to $300,000 for 3-year project and $150,000 for 2-year projects. We do also, the Applied Science Grants is part of a larger umbrella program that I mentioned earlier called the Basin Study Program. There are several other components to that Basin Study Program, including actual basin studies that Reclamation completes collaboratively with other stakeholders in a larger basin setting. The funding for those particular basin studies has been less consistent over the past few years, and we've funded more applied science grants and then also some water management option pilots, which is a way for folks to add on to existing basin studies. And if you have any questions about existing basin studies, you can reach out to me. You can also look on Reclamation's website to see where Reclamation has collaboratively completed those basin studies with stakeholders. All right, so now we get to on the ground projects. So if anyone is familiar with WaterSmart, you may be familiar with this first funding opportunity, the Water and Energy Efficiency Grants. This is one of our funding opportunities that we have the most funding for, and we can provide a relatively large amount of funding for. I think, again, in comparison to some of the funding sources that we've talked about earlier in this webinar today, where those loans are for many millions of dollars, our funding, our grant funding is definitely for smaller projects than that typically. So under the Water and Energy Efficiency Grants, we can provide up to $2 million for 3-year projects and $500,000 for 2-year projects. These projects are it's really focused on projects that are going to result in quantifiable water savings. So really has that water conservation focus. The main type of projects we fund under this funding opportunity are canal lining and piping. Most often this is in agricultural settings, but it can also be in municipal settings. The main thing is that it does need to be some type of upgrade. So if you want to replace one of your main lines, for example, it would have to be, maybe you have a copper main line or a concrete main line at this time and you want to upgrade to PVC, that would be acceptable. It just has to be some type of upgraded technology. We fund a lot of municipal metering, mostly residential side metering under this funding opportunity. Irrigation flow measurement devices. So this is often SCADA systems, mostly in agricultural settings, but can also be more for urban settings as well. Under this, we would also can fund gate automation for canal gates, improvements to diversion structures, actual meters, and then we can also fund landscape irrigation measures, so turf removal, high efficiency sprinkler systems, a variety of other things like that. And we do also fund small-scale hydropower projects under this funding opportunity. It's fairly rare that we get one, but we do fund them. I do want to mention that we are making some updates to the Water and Energy Efficiency Grants funding opportunity. And there is a document on our website at usbr.gov/watersmart that is available for public comment at this time with draft eligibility changes and evaluation criteria changes for the Water and Energy Efficiency Grants and a couple other funding opportunities that I'll mention in a moment. Those public comments are due June 4th, which is next Friday. We also have the small scale water efficiency projects funding opportunity. This is, we fund similar types of projects as we do under the Water and Energy Efficiency Grants, except for we don't fund any hydropower. But these are much smaller projects. So this is more, maybe you just have a small, one gate you need to improve, or several irrigation flow meters, or it caters to smaller entities, smaller cities who want to do a subsection of their residential meter upgrades to smart meters, and they don't have cost share to do the, maybe the entire city all at once. They want to do a small subset initially. So we offer up to $75,000 in reclamation funding, and this does also have a total project cost cap, which is approximately $200,000 per project. We're a little bit flexible on that, but if your project is going to be $300,000, it's going to be too big. So you're going to want to go to the Water and Energy Efficiency Grants or downsize that project. So we're really trying to gear this towards smaller entities, for smaller projects. This we do, this is still water efficiency focused, but the criteria are not so heavily focused on the quantification of the water conservation. It's much more focused on how is this project going to benefit you or your organization and your customers. The Drought Response Program is the second funding opportunity that we're making some changes to, and those proposed changes are in that public comment document that I mentioned that is currently available. The Drought Response Program is a bit different in that it's not so much focused on water efficiency, but it's focused on getting water to an area where maybe it's difficult to get water to currently, or at a time that it's currently difficult to get water to. And it does have a big focus on, what are the current drought conditions? Is the driver drought in your area? So, we do focus on the benefits and the evaluation criteria, but there's also a large focus on the drought planning that has gone into this project. So example projects that we fund are, we can actually do new conveyance system components under the drought program, water storage infrastructure, stormwater recharge facilities, small scale, I think, water recycling, and we can do also some decision support tools and modeling under this program. Again, 50% cost share. We can offer up to $1.5 million for 3-year projects and $500,000 for 2-year projects. We do have a new funding opportunity that is coming in fiscal year 2022. So this draft eligibility and criteria are in that public comment document I mentioned. This funding opportunity, there is honestly a lot that I can't tell you at this point because there's still a lot of kinks that have to be worked out. But the essence of it is that it is going to be a funding opportunity focused on environmental water resource projects, infrastructure-based projects that are more environmentally focused, and also restoration projects. So if you're familiar with the Cooperative Watershed Management Program Phase 2 funding opportunity that we've had in the past, we funded watershed groups to implement watershed management projects. Those entities and those projects will be eligible under this new funding opportunity. The Phase 2 funding opportunity will no longer be offered. And then we will also have some other project types and eligible applicants as well under this funding opportunity. So if there is a piping project, for example, that you want to complete, and there's going to be some water that you can dedicate to in-stream flows or work with to keep other entities to keep in stream for environmental benefits, that is something that would fit well. Fish passage projects, things like that would fit well under this funding opportunity. It will have a fairly broad eligibility, and it is going to have that environmental focus. So keep your eyes out for this funding opportunity. Go online, look at our website if you want to learn a little bit more. And the last program I want to mention very briefly is our Title 16 program. This is our water reuse and recycling and desalination program. There are several funding opportunities within it. There is a component that focuses on water reclamation reuse research, and then there are funding opportunities that are also for implementation. Some of the funding goes to congressionally authorized projects, and then some of it goes towards newer projects that were made eligible through a more recent process. So if you do have interest in water recycling and reuse, you can reach out and I can get you in touch with the appropriate folks. All right, so I think I'm probably running low on time, but I do want to briefly touch on a couple application tips. So one really important thing, and this is echoing other presenters today as well, is that we want you to find the correct funding opportunity for you. So, you know, it's best to get in touch with me. I have my contact information at the end of this presentation, or you can go on our website and find the specific program coordinator for certain programs. Get in touch with our office and ask us, tell us about your project, and we can point you in the right direction of which funding opportunity to potentially apply under. We don't want you to put resources into applying for a funding opportunity that is just not going to be a good fit for your project, because it won't be competitive or it might not be eligible, and we want you to put your resources in the best place. So, you know, go on our website, look at the different funding opportunities. You can download past funding opportunities. You can get in touch with our office, figure out which funding opportunity fits best for you. Make sure that you present your project in a way that aligns with that funding opportunity. So, for example, you know, there may be multi-benefits to your project, but if your project is, you know, a municipal metering project and you want to apply for it under the small scale water efficiency projects, great, that fits. But you want to make sure that you're describing the water management and water efficiency benefits versus maybe, you know, you can also discuss social benefits and things like that, but you want to talk about the benefits that we're focused on in those funding opportunities, so you can score the best as you possibly can under those funding opportunities. There are, you know, this is just a list of different systems that are involved in our application process and the receiving of grants. So, you know, make sure you read through the funding opportunity. There are multiple systems that you need to be registered in order to apply, or especially to be able to apply online via grants.gov. And then additional ones that you need to be registered in order to receive federal funding. And so it can be a complicated process. So start it early and get in touch. You can get in touch with me and I can put you in touch with our financial assistance staff and they can help you sort through these things. All of, you know, like the other presenters have said, when we give federal funding, federal grant funding, that triggers compliance with all federal environmental and cultural resource laws. And so reclamation does need to, you know, at least sign off on the compliance for those federal laws prior to any on-the-ground work happening as part of your project. So even if it's a planning project, there may be certain documents that need to be taken care of, but it's really particularly important for these on-the-ground projects. We can't reimburse any work or have any work in a financial assistance agreement that was done prior to reclamation giving the go-ahead and saying compliance is complete. So Take a look at the funding opportunity in the budget section. We discuss, whether or not you should be including a line item in your application and your budget for cost sharing those compliance costs. So take a look there, and you can also contact your local reclamation office to get some more information about what type of compliance might be required for your type of project. So generally, this is not fast funding. Between the time that you apply, submit an application, and the time that you will receive funding is going to be about a year. So we have, we post the funding opportunity. It's typically open for about 60 days. We sometimes try to leave some others open longer if there are new funding opportunities. Then there will be what we call an ARC, which is our application review committee reviews the proposals based on the evaluation criteria and the funding opportunity. And there are some additional review steps after the review committee reviews. So it's very rare that anything changes in terms of scores or ranking after that, but we do have a couple higher level reviews, including review by Reclamation's Washington office leadership in DC. Then once you're notified of selection, there is still a time frame for working with our financial assistance office to complete a financial assistance agreement before you receive your funding. That typically takes 3 to 4 months from the time you start. From the time you were selected, then you have 3 to 4 more months before you actually receive federal funding. So we do actually I advise that you think about what projects you're going to want to do a year from the time you apply. That really results in a lot less complication than trying to, start a project before you actually have the funding. For FY 2022, I will say that our schedule is still up in the air. In terms of when these funding opportunities are going to come out, but we do have a general timeline. I wanted to point out that those 3 funding opportunities that I mentioned that are having some revisions and are currently available for public comment, those funding opportunities we do anticipate posting in July of 2021. They will be open for at least 60 days, but probably more for some of them. In particular, the new funding opportunity will be open longer, and we anticipate they'll be closing sometime in the fall of 2021. The other funding opportunities, we have general timeframes listed here, and we'll be posting updates to our website once we have more information and more precise dates for when those will be posted and closing. But generally for 2022, we're going to be starting to post in the fall, and then some of them will be in the winter, and then they'll be closing either in the winter or the spring of 2022. We do have some resources online. So I mentioned our website, which is just usbr.gov/watersmart. Has some information about each of the programs. That has past successful applications for each of the programs and past funding opportunities. We do also have what we call a data visualization tool. It is an interactive online ArcGIS mapping tool where you can see all the previous funded projects since, I think, 2010. We're a little behind on getting some of the most recent data up, but it's interesting to go in and see what others in your area have done. You can also email watersmart@usbr.gov, provide your name and email address to be added to a listserv to get information when funding opportunities are posted. And with that, I'd like to leave any extra time to questions.
You did great, Robin. Thank you. Let's see. There's a question here. Where did it go? Here it is. Oh, someone has their hand raised. Let me see who that is. Let's see. Tess, Rick Warner has his hand raised. Are we able to give Rick a mic?
Yep, I am. I've made Rick a panelist. So Rick, if you'd like to unmute to ask your question, you're welcome to do so. If not, you can type it into the questions dialog box. Maureen, there are a few other questions, so maybe we could address those first while we're.
Okay, sounds good. Let me see here. Will there be another Title 16 reclamation opportunity in 2021? And that was from Rick.
Yeah, so I actually can't answer that question. I'll have to get back to you on that. So Rick, if you want to send me an email, I can get you in touch with Amanda Erath, who's the coordinator for that funding opportunity. I know there have been some recent changes to that program and that funding. And so I'm not quite sure what the status of it is right now.
Thanks. Okay, and Robin, another question is, what type of multi-benefits are eligible for the new environmental water resource project?
Yeah, so the type of project that we're thinking with that is similar to what we funded in the past under the Cooperative Watershed Management Phase 2, which is where you have basically stakeholders, multiple stakeholders that are going to receive benefits. So some of the projects, and this may not be all encompassing, but maybe a project that is doing a diversion dam upgrade and maybe a diversion gate upgrade. Maybe they're automating the diversion gate so that agricultural users can get their water more efficiently and get all of their water. And then also accompanying that, doing restoration work along with in that channel. So maybe doing riparian vegetation restoration, or maybe actually restoring part of the channel to create better fish habitat and things like that. So I think these projects can look like a lot of different things, but that is kind of what I right now have in mind in terms of what we've seen in the past. So basically, those projects that are going to be able to benefit multiple different stakeholder groups.
Okay, great. And then what about, it's kind of a similar question for the small water efficiency projects. I think you mentioned that the water savings don't need to be measured per se or demonstrated, but other type of benefits are acceptable. And what type of benefits would those be?
Yeah, so we're still looking at benefits to the main focus is benefits, what the benefits will be to the applicant's water delivery system. So, and your customers. So we're not asking, under the water and energy efficiency grants, we ask this long list of questions about how much water is going to be saved, and we require support for that amount of water, and it's really scrutinized by the review committee. You're welcome to include a number for the water conservation in the small scale water efficiency projects, but it's not going to be scrutinized in the same way. The review committee is going to say, oh, great, they're going to conserve water, and it's going to enable them to get their end users their water more efficiently, or maybe there's maybe there are water users that aren't currently getting their water right because there's just not enough water. And so, there's you want to talk about the other benefits to the customer, to your distribution system. You can also discuss broader benefits as well. So, if there's going to be, maybe the project can be used as a example project for other entities in the area who are thinking about doing the type of project but aren't really sure about where to put their money. Maybe it is going to enhance collaboration in that way. So there's definitely going to be other benefits. Maybe it really fits into a climate strategy for the state or something like that. But the focus is really on the qualitative benefits to the applicant's water system and their customers.
Great, thanks. Robin, that's all that we had, but the timing has been perfect. I'm going to go ahead and close out for the day. And I think everybody's got your contact information as well as our other panelists. Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you.
Take care. So let's see, that wraps up our webinar series. Thank you so much, very much to all our panelists. And for those who have been attending, I hope you heard the theme of contact me. We have money for you and we'd like to help you learn about it and find the good fit, and we're here to help you. Lots of different resources for you. We've got our EFC at Sac State website, my email. I'm Maureen Kerner, the Associate Director. The University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, the EFC there, puts together for every state in the country a nice summary of funding sources. And so we've provided a link to that from Nevada for you. A lot of the programs that we talked about today are summarized there. And then another reminder for the EFCN network, their technical assistant requests, if you're interested in that, here's the link for that. You should be receiving the video automatically as a registrant for today shortly after, in an hour or two. And again, the videos from the other days, as well as the slides from the whole series, will be coming to our website in a couple of weeks, and we'll be sending out emails to all registrants so you know that that's currently available. And with that, I thank everyone for joining us. I hope it was helpful, and good luck on your programs and projects. And hopefully we will be checking in with some of you in the future to hear about some successes. Take care.